so just gonna do a bit of streaming while I paint. I've got some Brotherhood of Steel models that I've been working on for a friend of mine, and he trying to get it done. I have about only like 4 plus these 4, so 8 to go, and these are mostly done. So we're gonna work on the T60s here. This one is the PVC one from the main box, so it lacks certain details. And my cat is clawing up stuff because she can. But still some good detail. You know, the Brotherhood of Steel logo on the chest is a little bit of squirt of water at her. Take care of that. All right. So the Brotherhood of Steel logo is a little smooshed on it. Now what I did with these kind of as a precursor is these are done with airbrush, since I didn't want to have the airbrush compressor noise on camera. So they were first done with a GW Air lead belcher with a zenith highlight of Runefang steel, and then they were gone over with some rust. So right now the rust effect is pretty deep, but that will change once we get some washes over it, and it should go back to more metallic. But this is a good starting point. The actual base coat was done with black with Zenithal of light gray, with the base kind of being done up in gray to make it easier to paint later. So we've got this PVC one, and we have one of the heavy gunners as well. So we're gonna work on both of these, and then when we get around to bases, I've got a couple other models that I need to do the basing on. And if we have time, we'll go ahead and get them all done. So first thing we're going to do is start kind of blocking out the colors that we want. Which, since we've got all the metallics done, our initial colors are going to be the background colors. And when I'm working on stuff like this, I like to have a reference model. You know, here's one I've done earlier. So this guy's all done up. So we're looking at just doing the black, which will be gray, in as the undersuit, picking out some highlights, getting the logo done up in white, and then on the back, just these pipings and pieces. So we're going to focus on that. Okay, so for the pipe itself, on the back, which is a very iconic looking piece, I actually go with a kind of khaki. So it's not even a kind of khaki, a Flames of War, so in other words Vallejo khaki. So we're going to do that. For the gray, we're going to use a dark gray. So I've got an Army Painter Necromancer cloak that I'll be using for that. And so that's really where we're going to start for today, is just kind of focus on getting those. The weapons I'm going to focus on last. Those may require some rebasing, so just painting on a base coat to then bring it up to a different level for certain spots. For instance, if I want to get the really nice red on these, but we'll see when we come to that, because there is a lot of metallics, especially the rifle. For the green, I will probably go ahead and paint a base coat for the contrast to make it match the contrast work on some of my other stuff. So let's go ahead and start. The khaki is the smallest amount, and I'm just putting it on my palette. I always keep a little dropper bottle of water handy to help thin it out. And obviously my camera doesn't autofocus very well, so it's not going to focus in on the palette or anything like that. Well, that's not what we want to see anyway. What you want to see is paint going on the model. So we're just going to kind of paint this pipe a bit. And you can, so you have to be careful with stuff like that, so you don't get it too much, but see, that just kind of rubbed off. And the other side here, as I said, this is the PVC one, so it doesn't have quite as much detail to work with, so you're kind of on your own for that. You can actually see the containers on the back here, which I'm going to assume are like for air or something. Maybe just hydraulic fluid, I don't know. I'm going to leave the metallic banding on it as much as possible. You don't have to be perfect. Remember, we're just going for a tabletop quality. Nothing super fancy here. Just enough that it looks good when sitting on the table. Now with this one, we can see the detail on the pipe because this is one of the resin models. So we can actually get that properly brought in. Probably a little too much on the other one, but that's fine. Again, it doesn't have the detail, so it's not going to show that we made a mistake as easier. And just getting those canisters. And power armor is a good starting point for a lot of armies. It's large. It doesn't have a huge amount of details, but even applying a small amount of color to it can really help push the model up and make it pop nicely. So that's all for those. So next we're going with our Necromancer cloak. And we're gonna put a bit of that out. A bit of water. And mix it up. A bit of separation in the bottle there. So just making sure that it's all nice and mixed together. Oh, and actually I did forget one thing. For the chest plates on this, we have the ribbing. Kind of, it's a little hard to see on this guy, but just behind his gun here. So I kind of want to put a bit of color on that. In the game, when you see it, it does have that kind of tan coloration. So we're just gonna give it the same there. That kind of helps differentiate the sections of the armor. This guy, you can obviously see that a lot easier there. So it comes in under the plate. Even with the PVC not having as much detail, you can see it pretty easily. So we're just going to go in there, pick that out, and then it'll give us a nice focal point on the front of the model to where it has a little bit of color differentiation. Break up all of that metal. And once we apply some wash over that, it'll really pop nicely. So what we're looking to do now is to kind of go in here. We want to hit the under pieces of the arms. So where the armor is kind of broken up and you can see the ribbing inside of it. So kind of in here. With the PVC you may have to guess a little bit. But also we're going to hit the pipes on either side of the helmet. Just being careful to pick that and only that out. Coming around the side there. And we need a little bit more on the other side. And then also if we want, we can come in. So I'm using one brush to do all of this. Pretty much everything can be done with one, I find. But again, I'm not going for super detail. So there we just kind of pick out the lenses. So obviously we can't get that piece of the armor there. I'm going to get the knees is another section. So especially here. Let's see if we can show that a bit. There we go. So right here where the armor separates and you can see the underpinning beneath, and then just a very thin line on the other one because it's not quite as closed. And then we're looking for the back of the knee as well, and just kind of hit those for the same reason. And again, we're just looking to get to block out the sections here. And any detail that's actually out on there, ribbing, etc., that will show up once we hit the model with a wash. Now, this section here, especially on the PVC model, we can see is very undefined, but this is a section where the suit kind of shows through. So we're going to use the paint to add the definition back the PVC model has lost. And you don't have to get it perfect, especially with the PVC model. It's, you know, any adjustment's going to look good. But we're just using it to kind of break up these panels here before the wash will do the same. So you can see we got the butt flap, and then each leg is defined with the black of the suit in between. And now we can also go through here, and there are some piping on the top of the thigh armor. So we've got a little bit here. So we can take this pipe here. We're just adding a bit of color. A little one there. And then mirror it on this side. And again, this just kind of helps break up the monotony of the color itself. Alright. And that's really all we have to do. Hit this a bit more. Alright. Now looking at this guy, and since we're done with one model, don't forget to clean your brush so you don't get paint buildup on it. You want to make sure that the paint's not going up into the frenel, which is this metal piece. Because once you get paint up in there, it dries, and that's what really damages the brush and causes it to separate. So generally between each model, if you're painting with different models, if you're just focusing on one, definitely between each color obviously, but you may, depending on how much color you're putting down, you want to go ahead and claws in between to clean. So again, we're just hitting these pipes. We've got a lot more detail to work with. You can see the ridges on these resin are a lot more pronounced. So when we hit that with a black wash, it's going to sink in there and change this dark gray to black pretty easily. And there's much more definition between the pipe and the armor itself. So we just want to make sure we're only catching the pipe. And then, so this arm, you can see there's no real spot to get in there and get that underpinning. Here, the underpinning is just kind of hidden. And already there's a lot of buildup of wash in there, but we can just hit it with dark to help. This arm, not so much. Let's go ahead and hit the eyes a little bit. So just a very small amount of paint on the brush there. And we don't have to get to the edges of the eye. We want to get the middle of it, because we don't want to worry about putting it over the ridge. And when we do the wash, the eyes will naturally fill into the edges with that wash. Alright, now looking, for instance, this leg, you can see there's no break because of the way he's standing. Same with the other leg, which means we have a much larger section. And once again, because this is the resin as opposed to the PVC, there's much more definition in the ribbing on the knee joint. And that will really help us in picking it out. And again, breaking up this monotonous metal. Get the other side here. And I forgot the pipes on the first guy on the back here, I believe, so we'll go back and do those. Yeah. So the pipes here are the other end of the one we did on the front of the first model. And you can see we've got much more definition between the plate and the suit here. But again, we're just going to pick out the suit so that we can get the break up the metal. It's not so much as to define the plates as we did on the PVC model, but just because the suit is a different color. Now from the front here, we can kind of get to that same piping. Just very carefully going to pick it out. The other side, we can't really get to it, so we're not going to bother. If we can't reach it with a brush, it's not noticeable. Some people would paint the gun off the model, and then that way they could get all of those details. But again, I'm just going for tabletop quality, and they were provided to me already assembled to work on. I'm not going to go through the hassle of breaking it apart, possibly breaking the model in order to fix that one little piece. Alright, let me hit these pipes real quick on the first one. I generally do a couple models at a time, not just because I only have 2 of these fancy GW holders, because as we can see I can just use a bit of silly putty and an old paint, a rattle can cap. Because I find doing 2 at a time with the Fallout models, because they're all unique, lets me focus more on them. Alright, so that's picked that out. Now we're going to go ahead and black wash these. So for that, I'm going to use an older brush I have. It has a larger brush head to it, and I'm not as worried about the detail on it, so it will work fine. That's my brown wash. This must be the only. Now, I accidentally picked up a bunch of gloss shade a while back, so I've been using that up, because when you hit it with the dull coat after, when I'm doing my sealing, it really doesn't matter. It'll take all the shine off of it anyway. Plus this gives it a little bit of extra protection. So we're just going to start down here on the leg just to see how this is doing. Yeah, and that's just what we want. Alright, so we can go a little heavier now and start going. I'm going to try and avoid the brown section there on the chest plate, because I want to come back and hit that with a bit of brown contrast to really kind of using it as a wash, but because it is contrast, it'll be nice and thick. And it'll really help pick out the detail on the lesser quality model. That, and I just love working with contrast paints. The only models I don't use contrast for are obviously the power armor, simply because it's metal and they don't have a contrast metallic. Not even sure how that would work. Alright, so you can see the legs are helping kind of tone, the legs are now toned down a little bit as far as the rust goes. And what we'll be doing afterwards, a little bit of dry brushing. The tanks here and this, even though it's a different color, I'm still going with black because they look fine. It's not as necessary to get it to, it doesn't have ridge lines to show like that front plate. Let's get the here. See, we're just pretty much willy-nilly going with the wash here. Front of the T60. I know everyone has their favorite Fallout armor, but I gotta say the T60 is definitely mine. Not just because it's the Brotherhood armor, I just like the look of it more than any of the others. I have to say it goes T60, T45, then the various Enclave versions, and last is the T50. I honestly cannot stand the T50 armor. I bought some because, you know, for the game, but honestly I just do not like their looks. Alright, so lots more detail to be picked out with the wash on here. There we go. I did go a little heavy on the rust with these, but like I said, we'll bring them back. Any mistakes can always be brought back. And if they can't, there's always a tub of simple green you can stick it into. My preferred method of stripping. Alrighty. Come down. Leg. You don't want it pooling at the bottom of the miniature. If it is pooling too thick somewhere, you can always spread it around or dry your brush a bit and use it as a sponge to kind of lift it out. So like here, we kind of want that to be a little, we don't want that built up. These little ridges tend to grab. So you want to spread them a bit. careful around the front here because we don't want it running down. Right. Then for this gun, we're going to go ahead and shade it. We'll come back and hit the sections we want to color later. This one does have a lot of metallic, so we'll make sure we're picking out all the pieces. And then the same with this one, but only in the front. Along the bottom here to kind of give this piece that would be kind of cut out. Go. That should dry like that. Alright, so obviously we can't continue to paint these as they are while it dries. So what I normally do here is go ahead and work on some basing. So let's take a look at the bases and see what we got. We've got, looks like an I-beam there, wooden planks, a barrel, and then stone blocks with dirt underneath. This one we have more wooden planks, road and sidewalk, some capsling here and there. Alright, and then these, wooden barricade, and looks like possibly a sidewalk because we got a very defined Nuka-Cola bottle. And for this guy, lots of bricks on kind of broken up stonework. So, not much in the way of dirt, so I don't need to use my usual ochre. This is mostly going to be in grays. Since we already have some gray out for the dark, we'll start with that. And we'll just start laying that down. And actually the first thing I'm going to do is apply some brown for those planks of wood. And I've been using contrast paint for that because it really helps pick out the texture that's on these planks. Now this is not the standard contrast base coats, but it still works just fine. And I'm not really going to care about getting it too perfect. If it slops a bit, we'll be fixing that when we come back with the grays anyway. But you can see it really folds into those crevices and highlights the grain structure. And this is on the PVC one. Let's see, wooden planks here. Yep, all of this is wood. How can people just leave wood laying around in the apocalypse? It's building material. Carry that off to your settlement. This one. And again, I'm starting with this because as contrast, it flows a lot. And so if it flows where I don't want it, it's easier to fix it as it's the first color that's been put down. Alright, and then this weird barricade thing here. Now, this I'll probably apply some color on top of as if it's like faded from paint. Or faded, the paint's faded off. Since this is some kind of construction barricade, I'm guessing. So we may come back in with some properly colored pieces. This gives us a base of metal to work with, of wood to work with. Again, picks out that grain nice. If we want to darken it a little bit, we just go with a second coat. There does look to be some debris just kind of on there, so I may take my dirt color and fill that in, but we'll let that dry first. Now for bricks, I've been known to pick those out with kind of a deep red. I'll probably do that as well, but because they're laying on top of everything, I'll do that last. So since we've got some dark gray here, I'm going to start using that up. It has dried a bit, so a bit of water to bring it back to life. And away we go. Way too much on the brush from mixing it, but there we go. Now we are painting over some detail stuff, but we'll be applying a wash over the whole thing, and once the wash goes in, that'll bring the details back. The bases are nice with Fallout miniatures. They got some great detail on them, but you don't have to spend a ton of work to bring that out because it is there already. Blocking out the colors and letting a wash do the work for you is a much easier job. And this is the PVC model even, and there's still great detail on the base. Plus, once all the paint's dried and sealed, we'll go back in and add some details, like tufts of grass and whatnot, and that'll look really nice. Okay. Actually, I will probably do some dirt work on this now that I'm looking at it. As we've got these kind of broken up rocks. So in between the rocks I'll add some of the dirt that I usually use. Which is kind of a yellowish brown. I quite like that for, apocalyptic dirt. The colors you choose for your bases, keeping them standard throughout multiple models, is a good way of tying your forces together as looking to be on the same battlefield. So if I use the same colors with this, my super mutants, my survivors, then it kind of ties them all together as being on the same battlefield. Some models you can't do that with. The Institute, for instance, are all kind of high-tech ones. So unless you plan on rebasing the entire line, that one tends to have to be done differently. A little bit more paint. Guess we're watering down a bit. There's enough water in there. Okay, so kind of see the line here, so let's bit of debris on there. So I'll probably bring that brownish yellow into that. And just pick that out. Take that edge around. Doing the edges of these bases can be a little tricky because you need to know where and when to cut off and when to carry the colors in particular. Alright. Then this one. So we've got a lot of slabs, it looks like. Yep. So this is like a slab of stone. The stone and then the bricks will look nice and bright next to them. Again, it was a very dark red, deep red that I'm using, and then when the wash goes over everything, they'll tone down a bit, but they will pop out quite nicely, I think. The rest of that can be regular old dirt. Should have probably cleaned the brush sooner than that, but there we go. Get busy with stuff, and that's what happens. Yeah, so I've been using Towelite Ochre as my dirt color. So again, we're just looking at blocks of color. So coming up to the barrel. Some of this may bleed a little together, but once the wash has gone over it, it'll all be kind of jumbled up anyway. And that'll help meld it nicely. And if you do find any hideous mistakes after you're done, well, that just means that's where your tufts go. Tufts hide all manner of problems. Okay, picking right here. in under this guy is going to be the biggest problem. So I'm just trying to go in there up against the barrel and the wood from that side, and really tuck it in from this other side. There we go. Bit of excess color on the barrel, but that's why we left it to paint until last. And there you can see, you're starting to see the actual sections. It really helps break up the various pieces. Go. And again, I'm just using that kind of old junky brush because I'm not focused on specific details here. We'll have to decide what flavor of Nuka-Cola that's going to be. Hit these dirt that this is falling on. We may actually pick this rock out with a different color. Do it like a white. Gray. I think there are a couple wood spots to pick out. This one. Now we're going to go kind of around the bricks when we can, but when we can't, we don't much care because the bricks will be done last. So if it comes down between the bricks and the boots, the bricks are going to suffer. If the boots pick up a bit of color, that's not a huge deal because it's just dirt. You're walking around the wasteland, boots are going to get muddy. I was happy to see the pre-orders for the new Vegas stuff go up this past Friday. So I've got that large bundle on order. I got the Hoover Dam bundle plus extra core set for both Kaisar's Legion and the NCR. I generally don't bother with bundles for like factions like the Enclave or the Brotherhood. I mean, not extra core sets in addition to the bundles, because I mean, power armor is expensive. You don't need a ton of it. You're much better off buying a extra thing of these guys in regular armor, and then you can field your cheaper troops. But with the NCR and the Legion especially, they look like they're going to be all about mob attacks. So having an extra core for them with some extra base troops makes sense to me. On top of that, Friday also saw them, I don't know if everyone caught it, release the Robo-Brains. So it's each set was like 2 Robo-Brains, so I got 2 sets of those to add to my robot legions. Plus, Robo-Brains are just cool. I mean, Come on. Brains in a jar. What's not to love about that? Alright. I'm going to pick the bricks out and apply the wash. That'll really look good. Okay. Light gray next, because we want to do the curb on our PVC model and pick out that stone on the one. Real quick though, we're going to hit... Where's my brown? There's my brown. I'm going to hit that wood a little bit more, since it looks like we missed a couple corner pieces. There we go. Yep, the slat work on that. And there. Yep. Before we forget. And then for our Nuka-Cola, we're actually going to say he's a quantum. We're using contrast Talisar blue here. Get that kind of livid blue color. Normally I just paint them as empty bottles, but there. A little bit of color there to break it up. And I put it down before the wash so that if I want, the wash can darken it down a bit as needed. Alright, light gray, that's what we're going to do. So we have ash gray from Army Painter. So we don't need too much of it. And we are going to water it down. Just a single drop of water, if we're not using too much. Mix that all together. And first things first, the curb. Just making sure we're not going to hit the power armor with it. Again, this is just to break up the kind of the fact that this is solid gray on both sides. It gives us a nice different shade down the middle. And then what we'll probably wind up doing is definitely putting tufts here, maybe there. There's a lot of wide open space on that model, so we want to break that up. And then this kind of secondary stone. And I think we'll go ahead and do the base of this in a light gray as well. Alright, now metal. Got that barrel and a piece of rebar sticking out, so we gotta color them up a bit. Now the barrel, you can always color the barrel, particularly like maybe a radiation, put some yellow on it, that sort of thing. For my purposes here though, we're just going to do a metallic barrel, and we're going to go over it with some rust later after it dries. And I'll be doing the rust prior to the wash, because the rust I dry brush on will be particularly bright, and then the wash will tone it back down and bring it in line with everything. Think of the wash on the bases as the kind of top layer of dirt that's on top of everything. So now, while that dries, I'm going to go ahead and pick out all those bricks. And for that, we're going with this heavy red from Vallejo. And it is a nice, dark, deep red. It's also pretty thick, so again, watering that down. And then we're going to use our big brush again, just to mix it up this time. Then wash it off. We're going to go back to my one brush. Because we want to pick these out nice and orderly. So basically, to begin with, anything that's white, I'm going to bring down into the red. Oh, I got a bit of a hair. There we go, got that off. And you can see it's very vivid, very bright. It will calm down though once we get that wash on it. And I like having these red bricks simply because I think it breaks up the monotony of the bases a lot. Plus, you know, this is Boston. It's a lot of old brick buildings. So obviously you're going to have a lot of old bricks fallen and lying around, which you should then be able to pick up and chuck at people, but there you go. Alright, and then some of these bricks are just already kind of painted over, so we're going to pick them out a bit. Come back here, pick that one out. You can really see the base start to take on a life of its own as we pick all of these out. And just a pile of bricks here. Trying to make sure we don't have a lot of white exposed still. Okay. All right. So for that stanchion, to my mind, most of them are white, just kind of set up. So I'm going to take a bit of white, I'm not going to thin it out. It's super thin anyway. And I don't use white, I always use an off-white, so this is Vallejo Ivory. And we're going to use my trusty GW, well not these, this is a D&D dry brush. So we have plenty of paint on it, and just start trying to remove the paint. And just doing little circular motions until, and with white it can be hard to tell, until there's practically none left. And then now we're just adding white to that paint. And then you can see, thanks to the texturing of the boards themselves, we can kind of go over that. And we are picking up a bit on the ground. Stone over here as well. Don't care so much about the stone. But we're getting a nice kind of worn paint look. That will fade back down once we go over it. Now for the barrel and the I-beam, we want to apply some rust. So for that, I have two different methods. One, I use a wash sometimes. So this is a dark rust. I also have a regular one. They work pretty good, but that's kind of what I use on the armor. And we can see it came out super duper dense. So I'm just going to dry brush on this Vallejo rust. And same technique as we just did with the white. And of course it's kind of stoppered up, so we're just going to use our X-Acto blade to pop, there we go, that little bit of paint out. Oof, and it was not happy about being compressed, it seems. There we go. And again, we're just barely any paint on the brush. There we go. And so we're just kind of hitting the highlights there. That gives us a good starting point. Next up is the wash. So we're going back to our older, thicker brush, and we're going to be using Agrax Earthshade. This too is a gloss I accidentally picked up rather than the regular, but we're not overly worried about it. Alright, so we're just basically going to spread it over the entire thing, and you can just see it gets in there, it gets in every little nook and cranny, and really brings the detail out on all of this. And it also really helps to just kind of blend everything together. Now, as unlike the models itself, we're not overly concerned about pooling, because that just means there's some heavier mud there. Okay, so because we are going so heavy, it will also take it a while to dry. Now, I think we're going to, yeah, that dried nicely, so we're going to be careful not to do too much on the quantum. So we're going to go around and then just flip over. Oop. A little darker than I wanted on it, but still good. And we can always suction up what we don't want. So we just come back and kind of pull that away. All right. Now there is a bottle cap on this road I forgot about, so I will hit that here in a second. And it's very easy to miss them, especially once you get painting, and especially on the PVC model. Alright, there you can kind of see the barrel gets nice and dark. Same with the I-beam here. So that's all nice and good. So then this bottle cap, we're just going to use the same red we used for bricks, and we're just going to kind of lightly get in there. Oh, now see, that was a mistake because the wash that's there kind of sucked it all away. There we go. And that should be fine. And if it's not, a tuft goes on top of it. Alright, so now looking at the actual armor, looks like we're still a bit tacky, so what we're going to have to do is call it a day for today and let all of this wash kind of dry up, and then we'll be back later to finish off the rest of it. So we will try and get the rest of this done